Welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast, where we deep dive into the best matches in AEW history. Brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network and your host, Sam Brown. Hello and welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sam Brown. Thank you for joining me. Every episode, along with a special guest, I take an in-depth look at one of the best matches in AEW history. If you enjoy the show today, you can subscribe or rate it on your podcast app of choice, support the podcast financially through Red Circle, and make sure you check out all of the other great shows on the Social Suplex Podcast Network, where we cover all aspects of the world of pro wrestling. One Nation Radio, keeping it strong style, all things elite, Tunnel Talk, the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast, Wrestle Art with Chris Sings, and Imp's WWE Adventure. You can become part of the Social Suplex community by joining our Discord, where you can chat directly to the hosts of the shows and other listeners about wrestling, sports, pop culture, and much more. And of course, don't forget to check out the Match Guide Substack, where I drop my written pieces, and you can check out the AEW Match Guide list as well. Links to all of these things are in the podcast description. My guest for today is the man who's managed to successfully make a relatively positive WWE podcast here on the Social Suplex. It's the host of Imp's WWE Adventure, also the man who is so often my partner in crime. It's Matt Maher, aka Imp, and today we're looking at Orange Cassidy and Jon Moxley's International Championship match from All Out 2023. How are you going today, Imp?
I'm doing good. I'm doing hot and sweaty. It's a very hot and sweaty.
Don't want to hear that, mate.
I gotta paint a lovely image for the listeners. Or just the sound pads everywhere on a 28-degree day. It's like, oh, it's lovely.
Oh, delicious.
Oh, delicious. Oh. Paint the pictures up.
Yeah, why not? Imp, this is your fourth time on this show. Thank you for joining me again. And it's great to have you back here as well. I've got to credit you as one of the reasons that I'm sort of been dragged kicking and screaming. Well, not really. I kind of did this all to myself voluntarily, but I was kind of inspired to dust off the podcast mic. Hearing yourself and a bunch of new people show up on Social Suplex at the start of the year has been really refreshing. And yeah, I have to give you some credit for what you do with Imp's WWE Adventure. It's just a really great bite-sized chunk of what's going on in WWE, just to dip in and dip out, just to sort of keep up with what's going on, and maybe you might, suggest something that is worth checking out on there. So I do appreciate that little podcast you put together.
Thank you very much. It's one of those that I sometimes miss the days where I'd literally just go live and then end recording and leave it done. I miss those days, of zero editing. It's quite nice sometimes, but yeah, thank you. It means a lot, because I do put quite a bit of time, more time than I would do into like a normal podcast, just because of the edited nature of it. Given I record like 50 minutes to an hour, but you actually get 30 minutes, so it's properly trimmed down and things as well. And also, I'll give a big credit to you as well for the AEW Match Guide, like the top 10 show that we did, and which I also edited. I'm quite proud of it. We recorded a Lord of the Rings film, and you got delivered a normal film. I was really happy how that sounded in the end as well.
But I'm not forcing him to edit this one, guys. I'm not forcing him to edit this one. Yeah. It's just one-off things.
Before we recorded, us already giving editing suggestions. I've already got ideas. But yeah, step away, Matt. It's not your realm.
The whole point when I said I'd get back into it, I told myself I wasn't gonna. I'm just gonna, take things easy and try and keep the, the level of perfectionist, the audio editor in me, like that used to work in a radio station. Try and keep him at bay. Just sit him in the corner. It's all right. Just edit out the obvious things. You don't need to edit out every second every that you say.
Yeah.
Every
For me, it's the lizard noises as well. Like right before you speak, and just do like a. It's just like, oh no, get it out, get away. No, I'll be listening to like a long bit, and I'm like, I can get through this without cutting out any of it. And then as soon as I start to talk, I make a lizard noise. It's like, no, get out of here. I can't do it. No, I can't deal with it.
Oh, I love that. I've never heard it called that before, but forever it will be embedded in my mind as that. We're, of course, talking about Jon Moxley versus Orange Cassidy for the International Championship at All Out 2023. You've been on this podcast a number of times, so I'm not going to ask you how you got into AEW. If you want to hear that, you can go back to, I think, episode 4, which was one of the very first episodes I ever recorded. But when I cast this open to you and said pick a match, why did you pick this one?
So one of the first matches that we talked about was Orange Cassidy versus Pac. And that might have been the first one on that episode.
It was, 4. Episode 4. Yes.
And because I'm being pretty open with that. I'm somebody who does applaud comedy wrestling. Like, I'm semi-joking when I was sending a question this week to Jeremy and Josh on Keep It Strong style of Toru Yano not being in the G1 this year. I was just like, how are you grieving?
R.I.P.
What are you... What's your process? What are you guys doing to get through this difficult time? It's like, I am joking. That's that question. But I did force Toru Yano, because me and Sam used to write a G1 Climax, weekly roundup of the tournaments were happening for wrestling headlines. And every single year, I would force a Toru Yano match into it. Every year, I'd get one, force one in. To Jeremy's dismay when he joined us one year. It's absolutely not. But yeah, so I'm a big applauder for comedy wrestling. Just the absolute value that it can bring, especially on a show where I think wrestling for me is at its best when it's a variety show. So there's different parts of it that you connect with and others that you don't. That's absolutely fine. It's why I'm more fine with the spooky stuff on WWE, just because it's not for me, but it's very clearly for somebody. And wrestling for me is peak when it's a variety show. It's not all the same. So yeah, fine, whatever. So when it comes to comedy wrestling, I kind of see it in that way as well. Someone who's really good at comedy wrestling and gets a reaction every single time, for me, is a really valuable asset. And that's why when AEW brought in Orange Cassidy, I was just like, this guy is going to be great. Because I'd watched him on the indies for quite a few years. I think that year he'd run a show, as in become popular enough where during the WrestleMania week, he had his own show through GCW, I think. It's something like Orange Cassidy's show or whatever. I think it was called. I think it was something like that. That
would be on brand for him, definitely, just to be Orange Cassidy's show.
I think on it, not to send the Tunnel Circle girls into a frenzy, but I think there's a match on it where it's Chuck Taylor versus Trent in a 30-second match or something. The entire point is they've got 30 seconds.
I'm already imagining the poster in the style of the art that he has on his Titantron and on his shirts.
Oh, it was a great show. But yeah, so it's in the same arena as Invisible Man versus Invisible Stan, because GCW just hired out that place for the entire WrestleMania week. So if anyone's watched that match, you'd be familiar with the vibe of the place. But anyway, that's a tangent. I'm a huge applauder for comedy wrestling. So when they brought him in, I was a huge kind of backer for him. We talked a little bit during the Match Guide Top 10 about when they brought in Orange Cassidy. I can't remember why, because he wasn't in any of the matches. We must have tangented there as well. So Orange Cassidy came in there, and there was a lot of kind of negativity coming from the kind of commenters and things, because at the time we were still writing for wrestling headlines, so we'd see it all. I remember writing a column about which brand Kenny Omega would go to, or which show, sorry, because of course it wasn't for definite he was going to AEW at the time. And I think me and you were just like, no, he's going to join his friends. They're setting this up together. But then you see so many comments of things just like, he'd be an idiot not to go to the place to go to because it's the place. And it just seemed the complete inability to picture somewhere else purposely trying to build a different way of doing things rather than this is the way it is. Therefore, that's the way it always will be. It's like, no. It's an art form. It changes, it evolves. And when Orange Cassidy came in, people were talking about him like the comedy wrestlers they knew, like Santino Marella. Like, why are they doing such a big thing about bringing this comedy guy in? He's just going to be a bit of a goof or whatever. We got the same reaction for Danhausen, so nothing had really changed in that time frame from Cassidy to Danhausen. But it turns out he's less as Santino to Tony Khan and more of the Undertaker to Tony Khan. He's the relationship. So I feel like
that is a hell of a comparison there, Rip. I've never thought of that before, but it's a hell of a comparison.
It might need a little explaining to realise. Yes. As in the relationship the Undertaker had with Vince McMahon backstage and the kind of creative nature that they had together in terms of working together on the shows and what they meant to each other backstage. apparently that relationship is very reminiscent for what Tony Khan and Orange Cassidy are like, as in they really do value each other's presence or whatever backstage. And just to see that Orange Cassidy became that rather than just cool comedy character, it's such a huge evolving. And of course, he's like, in terms of within the AEW fan base, he is the like really respected kind of guy as well. He's got that level of support. Where just in my mind, I was just like, I guess he kind of is AEW's Undertaker. Just that the guy who's going to be a gimmick that shouldn't work, and he's absolutely nailing it, and he's going to have such long longevity because of it. And hey, he might even do a goth phase. We don't know. It's not the question yet. Goth phase, Orange Cassidy.
Yep. You know, it's very. I like that comparison. There's a lot I like about that comparison, especially the idea of Orange Cassidy being the judge in Wrestler's Court.
Oh, yes. I'd love it if they were like a thumbs up, thumbs down Batista type of thing, because it's Orange Cassidy. Like, what's he doing? I don't know. Is that a no? Yeah.
What's that? There's that old thing with that, you know, like JBL or Edge or those guys would talk about, and they'd be like, yeah, the Undertaker would hold court, and of course it'd help if you bribed the judge with a bottle of Jack. What do you bribe Orange Cassidy with?
Or what did Mercedes Moné give him, like tequila or something? I think that was So she knows how to bribe the court. She's got it. She's got it. Tequila.
Orange Cassidy does strike me as like a kind of tequila, like something that's he's not like an Alco Pop, right? But he's a little bit fun.
He's not a WKD kind of guy.
He's not a seltzer. Like, he's a little bit fun though, but also a little bit like he's a bit of a connoisseur. He's got like some taste to him. So I'm willing to say he's a tequila man.
This is definitely a go onto the Tunnel Talk Discord and just ask them. Like, what kind it's definitely invented that vibe. Break it down.
You know, another reason I think it's interesting you brought up The Undertaker is because I've often said that Jon Moxley is the equivalent of The Undertaker in AEW. For different reasons, though. Like, you've picked out because of the character things that there is. And there's sort of some comparisons in terms of, you know, he very much symbolizes a lot that is at the heart of what the promotion is. But Jon Moxley does as well in many ways. But I've always considered him in terms of a comparison to like the late stage Undertaker, even, you know, like mid-career Undertaker of, you know, if you could match it with the Undertaker, you were a set wrestler, you were a made man, and you could make your career and really boost your career, even in a losing effort against the Undertaker. And it very much is that way against Jon Moxley. For Jon Moxley, he kind of sits at a level, even when he doesn't have the belt, at a level, you know, almost above everyone else, just because of how dominant he's been, how protected he's been booked, and how he, you know, in a different way to Orange Cassidy, very much represents the heart of what AEW is and what it's become, and, you know, even where it's going as well. For a long time, he was, you know, very much at the forefront of where it was going. So it's interesting that you made that comparison of Orange Cassidy and The Undertaker, and like it is a funny thing to think about, but I'm not prepared to totally dismiss it. But it's also interesting because I've often compared to Moxley to The Undertaker in that way.
They're both The Undertaker. There's different vibes of The Undertaker.
Yeah.
Just the different eras of him.
This is also a great choice, and we will get into the match itself very shortly and talk about the characters a little bit more. But it's very much a you and me sort of match, like matchup. In terms of, like, you know, obviously long listeners will know Jon Moxley is very much my favorite wrestler of all time, and you know, I'm not sure who your favorite wrestler of all time is, to be honest, but I know that Orange Cassidy in AEW is very much someone that you get behind quite a bit.
I'm the type of guy where if someone were to ask me, like, what's your favorite thing, like if you're at a party or something and someone hears you like wrestling, it's like, who's your favorite wrestler? It's like asking me what's my favorite movie, because I've got just like a collection of things I enjoy. I don't have a specific one that I love above everything else. Like, even like with this wrestling thing, like, I'm fandoms of other things. Like I'm not just pure wrestling. I do other stuff. But so yeah, for me, I don't like have a select guy that I enjoy more than others. I kind of like rotate round who I'm enjoying the most at a particular time. I don't think at the moment I've got anybody in particular that's jumping out at me as like my personal favorite. I'm enjoying the work of a few people. Like in AEW, I'm really enjoying the work of both Swerve and Ospreay at the moment. So the fact they're facing each other is just perfect for me at this exact moment in time because I'm so far behind both of them. But like aside from that, I haven't really got like a peak favorite guy. I just enjoy the vibe, Sam. Enjoy the flow.
Hey, that's a good way to be. That's a good way to be. So let's specifically start focusing on this match. Of course, as we always do here on the AEW Match Guide, let's give the match its flowers. Excuse me. The match, when it happened, got 4.5 stars from Dave Meltzer in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. The Inmates Cage match currently rated as 9.13 as of recording. And when we did the AEW Match Guide, the top 50 matches in AEW history, it came in earlier this year, actually. It came in 29th. So a match that is held in very high esteem, if not in the top echelon of matches that AEW has happened, but one that is very much worth talking about for a number of reasons. It sort of really brings together a number of things that we can talk about that happened in AEW. In particular, Orange Cassidy, who, as we sort of said, has become like a really big part of what AEW is. And unexpectedly to a lot of people, including myself, has really become like one of the main characters of Dynamite and one of the characters that people look forward to. Like I would say a draw in AEW in a way that I did not expect to happen. As you mentioned, we sort of talked about him in the 4th episode of the podcast. We talked about the match he had against Pac, which was his first main singles match he had in AEW. I think it was his very first singles match he had in AEW. He had that at Revolution 2020 on pay-per-view. And we talked about, how we talked about his character he'd revealed up to that point, how when he's motivated to wrestle, he's kind of a very strategic wrestler who sets up traps. He lulls his opponent into false senses of security with like his comedy and lighthearted hijinks before, he explodes and does that high offense, like the Superman punch, like the beach break, like the Stundog Millionaire. That was the match against Pac in 2020. But the match we're covering today, there's a lot of water under the bridge between then and now. And Orange Cassidy developed quite a bit as a wrestler, a character, and, like as a star in the company. As someone who, really has appreciated him from day one and has really followed and got behind him from day one, how did you see all of that change?
It was really the Pac versus Orange Cassidy match was the momentum from that just kind of naturally carried over the course of time. They did a really good job of carrying it through. There's some bits in the road, like the Adam Cole feud didn't really hit for a lot of people, when the Jericho feud as well with the Mimosa stuff. But it helped establish the Orange Cassidy character, even though the actual feuds themselves didn't really draw that much applause or whatever. Because like with the Chris Jericho match, where it's the Mimosa match, and it's like, wait, I'm sorry, is it bad to fall into the mimosa? I was like, I'm sorry, it's not like it's like marmalade or something. Like it's mimosa. It will taste delicious. Like what's the problem here? But but anyway, yeah, like he's still kind of within that comedy realm of stuff, but through those feuds, you actually start to take his character even though a bit more seriously, even though you're still kind of doing comedy stuff or whatever. But the way those feuds, they helped establish his character like that. And I kind of feel like a massive turning point was when he won it, was it called the All Atlantic Championship or was it the International?
Yes. Yeah, it was the All Atlantic Championship.
So I feel like that is the turning point of genuinely taking him seriously as a character. That was a really good call from Tony Khan, just because even though you kind of were behind his character, he was still not taken seriously as a singles competitor, as like a guy who could win championships. Like he'd had matches in world title matches, like the triple threat at Double or Nothing, like the first one in front of crowds again. But he still was never believed as a guy who could become a singles champion. But that international championship run, because he crosses over the change of name, that for me is the turning point. That's when suddenly he becomes that main character you were talking about, rather than like somebody where you enjoy his segments, but he's not like a main event guy or whatever. This is what changes that, and just consistency with the title as well. We'll talk about kind of how his title run went in a minute, but for me, it was just such a strong natural progression. In spite of maybe his feuds weren't the most applauded at the time, but they really helped establish his character and kind of set him up for his title run that he had for that title.
Yeah, it's interesting because that All Atlantic Championship, I'm curious what your thoughts were on it when it first came out, because I don't know, for me it almost felt like a belt too far, a belt too much.
Yeah.
In AEW at the time, particularly with, on the heels of the ROH acquisition and all of their belts suddenly flooding in, they then had this other belt that came out, and it really just felt like one too many to me when they first announced it. Had a great match at Forbidden Door, and Pac sort of gave it a bit of an identity, defending it elsewhere and only really defending it once or twice in AEW before he got beaten by Orange Cassidy. But certainly for Orange Cassidy's character, you're correct that like he always floated, or he was always popular. He was always someone who the crowd was right behind. You'd see kids dressing up as him, and he seemed, as much as we know about the merch side of things, it seemed like his merch was always very popular as well and selling very well. But it really marked a change in his character when he became that champion. And you can even see it in the way he approaches being a champion. He like kind of realized that he thrived under the pressure of being champion and the challenge of and challenging himself to see how far he could go, where previously he kind of had that lackadaisical attitude. Obviously, he would fight for his friends, he would defend his friends, and when pushed, he would fight someone like Pac, or he would go for a championship. But, it wasn't until he got this one and he actually held it that he really found himself as a wrestler, I feel like.
Oh,
as a character, that is. Obviously, he knew how to wrestle beforehand. That's not saying he found himself as a wrestler. Sorry, just to clarify. As a character found himself and found like a new side of himself that he didn't know existed before.
Yeah, Sam's the one at the arena chanting, "You can't wrestle like Orange Cassidy." I knew it. But I totally agree. Especially with all the titles, and it's on Forbidden Door as well, where you're being asked to care about the New Japan titles for a night as well. So there was a lot of influx happening at that time on Ring of Honor itself, on Forbidden Door. So it felt like one way is like, it's nice that these guys who we kind of wanted to see in title areas, but were never really had a spot with the TNT or the AEW title, like have something to fight over. I do like the idea of a third men's singles belt. It does kind of help that. But yeah, when you add in the Ring of Honor titles and you add in the New Japan titles, it was a lot at the time. Like that was a lot for your audience to connect to. And Pac, I feel like, was a really good choice for the first champion, but it was Orange Cassidy who made the title. The prestige that title has now is all because of Orange Cassidy, and the way Tony Khan booked him as well was a really big part of that. For me, in that era when he was champion, it got to a point where I'd go onto Fight TV to watch the show, and the show starts and Orange Cassidy's music would hit, and I'm like, wait, am I watching the wrong week? And I go back, it's like, no. He would open so many Dynamites with those title matches to a point where I started to get I had to double check if I was watching the correct week, because it'd be his music again opening.
Yeah. Of course, the reign lasted 326 days, 31 successful title defenses. And yeah, like it's impossible to go into all those matches, but I definitely agree with you. Actually, there is a YouTube video I might put in the podcast description. And I'd be interested to know if anyone's watched it, that has all of his international championship matches on it, except for the Moxley one. And they put it out just before this Moxley one as like a hype video. So I think it goes for like 2.5 hours. But he was such a presence on Dynamite during that reign. And for me, like, he was at that point, he was one of the things that was bringing me to Dynamite when my interest in it was starting to wane a little bit. And he was someone that I was genuinely excited for nearly every week to see have a match when there was stuff on Dynamite that I was really disliking and really didn't like and was, bordering on fast forwarding, which was not a place I'd been in with Dynamite up until that point. But during that reign, he was very much a drawing card for me. Particularly once, you got into once the BCC and Elite feud petered out a little bit and we're in the build up to All In, like Orange Cassidy was my number one thing in AEW at that time in terms of what I was looking forward to and what I was interested in.
So yeah, because at the time you got different characters and things building, but I think that's the main critique of there were phrases WWE isms kind of creeping into AEW, and a lot of it was through the MJF title run and the kind of feuds he was having, and it almost reaches a boiling point with the Jay White match at Full Gear, so it kind of builds throughout the summer to that point after a really strong start for MJF, and I'd count Double or Nothing within that kind of strong start for him as champion. Then the summer happens. And it just and obviously there's a lot of stuff happening backstage. It's not a calm thing. I guess the other addition is the launch of Collision, which for me, it's one of those where I don't know if I use the word diluted, but it's too much wrestling water. Like it's not as strong. The orange squash isn't as strong. you put too much water into it. So I don't watch Collision a lot of the weeks. Yeah, but obviously we've got people here on the Social Suplex Network that can fill me in on what happens, so I know a lot of the time what happens. But I don't watch it every week. Like it's just a little bit too much. But that vibe was creeping into AEW at the time. It's just like I don't know if the phrase a watered down version kind of works because I'm sticking with the metaphor. I'm sticking with it. But that's the kind of way I was feeling about AEW at the time. Obviously, massive asterisk because I did go to All In, and that was a huge kind of boost of momentum in terms of how excited I was for AEW at the time. But for the overall product, I was starting to kind of skip through stuff and not watch it. And part of that was because of Collision. Like I knew if I wanted to watch Collision, I'd sometimes skip through stuff just because it airs on Saturday. I won't be able to watch it till Sunday. And if I don't watch it on a Monday, that means on Tuesday it's Monday Night Raw time, and then it's suddenly I'm just not going to watch Collision at that point.
Yeah.
But that just mean my vibe towards AEW was shifting around that time. Whilst Orange Cassidy is right there as a center point of a great consistency. And I joked about me getting confused about which week it was on the show because he opened up so many of them. But that was a needed consistency. That really, it both established him, the title, it gave a grounding to the show, which was much, much needed at that time. And a kind of guy to support who isn't really just involved in any of the bullshit. That's his character, to be fair. He doesn't like to get involved in any of the bullshit, but that really, really helped.
That's so much it, because you think around Double or Nothing happens and then Blood and Guts, and pretty soon after that, like the Elite have re-signed, but there's so much controversy around them at that time. CM Punk's Collision is going, and there's just like this turf war that's happening, and there's so much negativity around a lot of these things that had drawn me into AEW. And that I loved about AEW, but Orange Cassidy was that consistency, and it was like a link to the heart of what, I loved about AEW in the old times, but like that goes right back to the start, and it was universally loved. And so I think that reign was like something that I very much clung to in that period, between Double or Nothing and, this match here that we're about to come to, as like, this is a link to so much of what I loved about AEW and a reminder of what it stands for, this guy, this champion. And, you get the progression in this reign, and, I'll ask you in a second, what matches stood out for you, but I loved, the progression in his reign as he like told this long-term story of like slowly getting more and more beat up, more strapped up, but refusing to give in and just constantly wanting to fight and wanting to prove himself in the ring and wanting to, take on everyone as champion. And there was something just so special about that and beautiful to see, particularly as it was someone who, I'd never expected this to be, this to come from. I never expected to be thinking of Orange Cassidy as like, at the end of the year when I'm thinking of who's my wrestler of the year for the company, Orange Cassidy is, up there and challenging guys like Bryan Danielson for it.
Oh yeah, it's it's kind of crazy to think about how successfully it worked in elevating Orange Cassidy, and again that phrase of him becoming a main character. Yeah, it kind of happened over this title run. I don't really know if there is any specific individual matches rather than it all melding together into a positive feeling for the title run. Which is odd, 'cause normally with title runs you pick out specific, like with Hangman's run, you think of the specific matches, and any specific good like defenses and things. Same with the MJF run and Kenny Omega run, whatever. But with Orange Cassidy, it's weirdly, it feels like it's not about that, which feels strange for AEW given the in-ring focus. But it kind of just feels like they nailed how a title run should feel rather than giving me specific matches to go, this was the one type of thing. Obviously, I've picked out this match, and this match is a bit of the opposite of that because it's such a clear elevation to me. This is really the moment. But aside from this match, I don't really have I don't know if you do, but I don't really have any specific ones over the long reign.
No, I agree with you there. It wasn't like he was never going for like standout. Like he never had a half an hour match aiming for like that Dave Meltzer 5-star sort of style. It was very much like we're going to have great television matches. And so the ones that I've thought of are that, like obviously beating Pac originally that's kind of a fulfillment of the story that they set up with his original match that we were talking about earlier, to become AEW champion. I loved the battle royale that they did. It was a 21 man battle royale, and OC went coast to coast in it, and they had a great interaction with Swerve at the end, the final bit of it, and then they had a great match. Swerve and him had a great match the week after as well, or maybe a fortnight later for the title. I actually thought that was when Swerve was going to, I thought that was when he was going to lose it. It was going to be like, look, he went coast to coast, but it was just a bridge too far going further. And I thought, like Swerve is really surging right now. He's going for big things. Maybe this is what he's going to take. He's going to take the international title, and that's going to be him taking it to the next level. And it will be, like a good finish for Orange Cassidy's title reign, going coast to coast in the battle royale. Obviously, that didn't happen. Swerve was going for big things, but he went on for even bigger things later on in the year against Hangman, and then of course becoming AEW champion. So I kind of had the right instinct, but I just didn't have the timing right. I remember in the Big Bill match, Orange Cassidy trying to give him a body slam, which I thought was pretty hilarious. Yes. And another one that was kind of a nod back to the original designs of the All Atlantic Championship. Orange Cassidy defended it on a New Japan show against Gabe Kidd, and it was just a great brawl. And like Gabe Kidd is such a great agent of chaos, and in some ways Orange Cassidy is also a bit of an agent of chaos. So they just had very good chemistry, and I enjoyed that match as well. But yeah, you're right in that like he never went for the giant epic match. It was kind of just telling this longer term story of him slowly getting more and more beat up. And in these matches, he would just sell and sell and sell it's funny. Like he was one of the most traditional wrestlers in AEW. And it's like such a big middle finger to like the old school heads who just like really disliked him early on for his comedy stick and his antics. Cause they said it was too meta, but here he is having like these really traditional face matches where he's just getting beaten up and beaten up and beaten up and just managing to come back and, going out there with his arm raised, but staggering out, having, been beaten to within an inch of his life.
I feel like for me, it's the fact he's able to incorporate the kind of comedy side into his wrestling, into using that to get you behind him so that when he gets beaten up, you're like, come on, Orange. Come on. Yeah. That he's going to try support vibes still there. Being able to use that to get the crowd behind him. He's got it figured out.
Indeed. And special shout out as well to his interviews with Renee. They've got really special chemistry, him and Renee. And he would just when she'd just be like, how you doing, Orange? And he'd be like, I'm tired. I'm really tired.
It was because I think we were recording this like a week or so after. I think it was Mark Briscoe, Kyle O'Reilly, Orange Cassidy, and there might have been another person there, just all doing an interview with Renee. And I think the entire point was whoever they're feuding with just ran across the screen to shout something or whatever, and they all react different ways. Mark Briscoe, the second he talks, and if anyone can go back and rewatch that, as soon as Mark Briscoe talks, just watch Kyle O'Reilly's face. Like, he is struggling. But yeah, after that whole thing happens, it's just the vibe that Orange Cassidy has with Renee. Orange Cassidy just very, like, not really caring, that just like, who was that guy? It's just like everybody else are like, oh, it's the person we're feuding with, and Orange Cassidy doesn't really, he's not been paying attention. Doesn't really know, he's just tired. It's what's having that.
Of course, Orange Cassidy did have an opponent in this match, so we should probably speak about him a little bit. Of course, I've spoken a lot about Jon Moxley on this podcast, so there's plenty of times you can go back and listen to me talk for hours and hours about my favorite wrestler. But I've never actually spoken to you on here about Jon Moxley. So in AEW, just generally, what has Mox meant to you in AEW, and also, you know, what do you think his character means in the context of this feud up to this point?
I'm just trying to think, how would I describe him in terms of, like, because he does feel like a heart and soul in terms of what AEW is trying to be as a company, as a business as well. And because obviously there are different people who would claim to be like the heart and soul, whatever you got, the Hangman's, the Elite, whatever. But Jon Moxley feels like a really strong representation of what they're trying to achieve with all of this. Just the way, not just in terms of his character on the television, but the way that he's in the wrestling world. Because like WWE's wrestling world is, we are the wrestling world, we are the mountain. You want to climb us, and everybody else is just little villagers. They're not a mountain. We are the mountain where everybody aspires to climb. Whilst AEW's presentation is more like, the whole wrestling world is the mountain, and you want to watch all of it. The whole thing is incredible, and Jon Moxley has been a great part of that. In just like, even this past week for us, where he's wrestled in Japan for Bloodsport, like and he's currently IWGP champion. He does so many different indie dates and things, and a lot of it is just because of the love of it. But that was a thing for AEW, to change how people looked at professional wrestling as not just this one place to look at and be like, oh, I want to go to Hollywood. I want to go to that one place. It's more, no, the entire thing is special and magical. And Moxley's done a really massive job of elevating that kind of aspect and way of looking at professional wrestling.
It's interesting, a reflection of like who they are. Jon Moxley and Orange Cassidy have actually got a lot in common in terms of the way they've like kind of backed themselves. And obviously Jon Moxley's, you know, was very successful before he came to AEW. You know, like he had a Hall of Fame career before he went to AEW, but he left WWE because he wanted to back himself, and he wanted to march the beat of his own drum in many ways. Like I remember on that Chris Jericho interview, he said, look, if the wrestling world didn't exist, I would have had to, like, outside of WWE, I would have had to start it again myself, because he wanted to back himself and wasn't willing to listen to, you know, the conventional wisdom of how you conduct yourself as a professional wrestler. And Orange Cassidy is very much that way, and we're going to get into that when we talk about, you know, the promos that these guys have. But they have a lot in common in terms of how they have gone about being themselves in a business that tells them to be different.
Oh, that's huge for both of them, the way that they've decided to go ahead of it. I'm trying to think in terms of like the shows themselves, what Jon Moxley's kind of character means to AEW. But I, to kind of simplify it, I guess that's just because he is one of the people we talk about the heart and soul of AEW. He is somebody who has really helped establish what that even is in kind of these early years. Yeah.
Well, he had that, you know, I mean, when he got that, you know, when everything went down with CM Punk a year before this match, we're going to talk about that. He had that incredible promo afterwards where, you know, like he gave one of the best promos he's ever done. It's funny, on the Discord this week, we're talking about great promos, and I was like, Jon Moxley, like himself, has had a pantheon of great promos, and one of them, of course, is this is what AEW should have been. AEW was this. AEW, should have stood for this. And he very much represented all of that. Backing yourself, the joy and the proving how great professional wrestling is, taking the old ways of the business and throwing them in the trash and showing that there's a better way to do things than, these old outdated traditions, and toxic cultures that have been surrounding wrestling. And I think his position in the company is very important going into this feud as I said at the start, he's kind of the final boss. That's what I mean when I'm saying he's the Undertaker. He's like the final boss of the company, even though he'd, been beaten by MJF in 2022 so that MJF could become champion. And then, of course, straight afterwards, he had that brilliant feud with Hangman Page, where ultimately Hangman came out on top. That's the feud I talked about a couple of weeks ago with Trish. He still very much occupies and has that aura of the pinnacle of wrestlers in AEW. And he very much plays that role that he did against Hangman in this feud with Orange Cassidy.
Oh yeah, for definite. For definite. He feels like a massive main player. And if he, to be fair, so I think he and Danielson have really helped complement each other with the Blackpool Combat Club, where they've both got that aura. Entering a fight with me is going to make you, you're either going to bring it and really establish yourself, or I'm going to beat the piss out of you. It's either or. And you're going to bleed regardless. But it's the Jon Moxley thing of I'm not going to even consider being friends with you until I've bled with you. Type of thing. And just that aura, the way that the Blackpool Combat Club was established in that, the Wheeler Yuta match, the way that kind of established that as well. And just the way you earn respect with Jon Moxley has been established to be particularly unique in kind of that aspect. And this felt like that moment for Orange Cassidy, this match I'm going to get to, where it's been how you earn Jon Moxley's respect. And this was Orange Cassidy basically going through that pattern of... And by proxy, that's kind of been told to the audience that this is how they earn your respect as well. Just in terms of, because audience conditioning is a thing in spite of... Yeah,
absolutely.
It's very difficult to talk about WWE and fan conditioning because there's a whole crowd of people who just refuse to think it exists. It's just like, me and you both studied film. Anything that's recorded will condition you. Patterns exist. It's a thing.
Well, you're right. It's like a thing of the audience respects Jon Moxley. So by proxy, if Jon Moxley respects someone, then we should respect that person. That's like how presenting characters works. In the lead up to this match, so if we'll get into the lead up because we'll be drowning in Orange Cassidy and Jon Moxley respect talk in a couple of 20 half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour. The lead up to this match, these two sort of came into one another's orbits through their factions because while Orange Cassidy's having this great run and defending his international title, he's also part of the Best Friends. And the Best Friends and the BCC end up having a number of matches against one another and sort of being pitted against each other. There's a great parking lot fight between Mox and Claudio and Chucky T and Trent. And then there was an anything goes three-way with Trent, Penta, and Jon Moxley in there. And then ultimately, of course, we got the Stadium Stampede at All In, which pitted Best Friends and Blackpool Combat Club and Friends against one another. You're actually at All In. Yeah. What are your memories of that match, specifically Orange Cassidy and Jon Moxley's roles in it?
Because that's the one where Orange Cassidy, both he and Jon Moxley take a proper beating. They both come out of it incredibly bloody. And obviously Moxley, because he's a madman, taking the... I don't know what you call them, but the spikes into his head. He's got a handful of
the chopsticks, sharpened chopsticks.
Yeah. Well, it's the fact that me realising that Moxley had somehow talked his way into doing that at Wembley Stadium.
I know.
It's just like, oh my God. Watching that kind of match live, I kind of became jealous of anyone who's attended an Anarchy in the Arena match. Like a proper one, like a proper Double or Nothing special affair. Basically, that's just me saying I'm jealous of Floyd. But they seem so exciting to be a part of the crowd with. Because I just remember when Claudio and Eddie are brawling backstage at Wembley, and then they come out to the crowd. They were literally like one section over to my left, and just seeing that. Just in such a huge stadium, and suddenly they're right there. It's just like, oh God. And there's still chaos going in the ring. And I know this stuff isn't going to get recorded. And then directly below me appears a white van. It's like, oh my God, it's Sue. Getting experience, and like so many people having the Sue pop. Because I'm looking like down at that area. I was kind of like back right. Or if you're looking at the stage, I'm back left of the screen. And yeah, Sue's directly below, turning up.
Nice.
So that was really cool, just to see that. For me, they do a really good job of selling this just chaos everywhere. Because of course there's big screens showing what's happening in the ring, and now and then they'll cut to the back. But really, there's just so much going on. It's really fun. I know you want me to specifically talk about two people, but the overall.
No, I like talking about. No, I like talking about it generally because it's interesting to like hear how it translated, because I feel like I love that match. That was my favorite match of the night, actually. And I absolutely adore that match for many reasons. But one of the things I worried about with it was how, if the vibe of like the Anarchy in the Arena matches, which are like crazy, if it translated to a giant stadium, because obviously like the T-Mobile Arena and the MGM Grand in Las Vegas are much smaller arenas than Wembley. Like Wembley is a stadium. It is ginormous. You know, it was one of the biggest wrestling shows ever. And I was curious if that vibe of chaos still was able to translate into such a bigger place. It sounds like it did.
For me, it did. I wonder if it did for someone on like the opposite side of the stadium.
Yeah, who's like 200 meters away.
Yeah. But for me, as I was just talking about, like if I looked forward, I could see the ring and what's happening on the screen over there. Directly to my left is Claudio and Eddie. Below me is Sue. Like for me, I was in the right place for it to be all in all directions. Something was happening. But if I'm on the opposite side of the stadium, I guess my comparison would be, for me, when the Blackpool Combat Club entered the arena, that was on like the polar opposite side of the stadium. So I couldn't see shit. All I could see, I had to watch it on the screens. Because when you're live in a stadium like that, sometimes you have to just promise yourself, like, okay, this time I'm actually going to watch the people in the ring and not just watch the big screen. Because it's one of those where they're right there in front of me, but I'm watching it like I'm just home at the watching it on telly. It's just
it's so far away. I've never been to a stadium show. It's so far away. I don't know how else you'd be able to watch it than focusing on the screen half the time like that. It's interesting. It's good to hear that, because that didn't translate to me on camera that they entered from the opposite side of the arena. So it kind of gives them, you know, because when they entered, like people just ran and swarmed them a little bit, which was kind of cool. But it's good to hear that they sort of plotted it out that way to give both sides a bit of something. I think you guys got the better side of it, but like certainly a lot more happening your way because you're close to the entrance ramp as well. So like they had that big charge at each other where Eddie Kingston just like runs down and starts fighting Claudio at the start. But it's good to hear that it kind of translates, at least for yourself or the people, you know, members of the audience, that vibe, because that's what I got at home. And particularly like Orange Cassidy and Jon Moxley, as you said, they're very much at the center of it. I'd say like Orange Cassidy is almost the main character of it. You know, I reckon the best friends are like the main characters of this whole thing, because like the match, the end of it centered around like Orange Cassidy having that glass bottle and like breaking it into a bag, taping his fist up opposite and like rubbing his hand in the glass shards and then hitting Superman punches, just like so brutal and like but such a cool image of him being willing to sacrifice himself to win, and like almost in many ways it like complements what he'd been doing and how he'd been punishing himself for the glory with his international championship run.
Yeah, it's another one which with all the silliness that was going on in the match, and I guess you got the brawling stuff with Eddie and Claudio, but with Orange and Jon Moxley, they were the ones who really elevated it towards the violence. Obviously Eddie did, but he was like zoning in on one guy pretty much.
He zoned in on Claudio and Jon Moxley in the end.
Oh yes. But it's just the fact that these two were like, obviously you knew they were going to have that match 1 week later. So it's kind of felt like Jon Moxley is so good at really making you feel like these guys just want to have a fight. And again, so bloody and violent in what what was otherwise quite a silly match up to a certain point. It's a bit silly, and then the final lot of it, run of it is just so violent. It's just so much stuff. Everybody bleeds. But yeah, I feel like it was another important step for Orange to show that he can step up to that level of violence. Because I think he'd already done it a bit at that point, but we're still getting used to it. And in terms of conditioning you of being used to seeing where a wrestler can go, this is really important just to show that, so that you believe he can take that extra step in the match the week after, because you watched him attempt the step here, which was huge.
Yeah, that was like an escalation of anything he'd done before, and looked so hard. And like that image of him and Chucky T and Trent like walking out victors, that to me, that's like the image of the day. That's the defining image of the day for me. It's like three friends who, like, they'd been told that they would never make it, that they would need to change, but they refused to. They didn't conform, like they backed themselves. And, like here they are walking out of the, one of the biggest pro wrestling shows ever as victors, and the crowd's just like on their feet for them. And, they're battered and bloody, but they've made it. And it's, like that's the defining image of the day for me. And it's one of the reasons I love that match so much. Unless you've got anything further to say about that, I think we should move on to the 1 week build that the OC and John, the direct 1 week build that OC and Moxley had.
I mean, I'm in danger of, as soon as you said what your favourite image was, I was like, I wonder what my favourite images of All In were. And I was like, wait, no, tangent. Tangent. That'd be me spending a while going through about 5 or 6 different moments on the show. We're here to talk about that's not the gimmick of this podcast. That's not what we're doing here.
Yeah. Of course, after Stadium Stampede, Orange Cassidy always won. He's a busy man. He immediately faces Pentagon in the ring, on Dynamite straight after, this going through this hellacious match. He doesn't back down from another fight. And he retains his title. And afterwards, it's already been announced that the winner of this match will face Jon Moxley at All Out. And afterwards, Orange Cassidy, he sits down and I think it's his first ever in-ring promo. And he just gives a really great promo. I'm just going to read it through because it's so good in terms of like how it talks about what he's going to do and what he stood for and how he's proud of it. So he says, "I don't usually talk. I'm so tired. My body hurts. And every single time I have a title defense, the backpack gets a little heavier. But you know what? I'm here. I'm wrestling. I'm defending the International Championship. This means everything to me. This is what AEW is about. It's about putting a person that's been told you'll never do anything. You're too skinny, too short. You're just a little too different. I am the champion, and I will continue to defend my championship for as long as I want to. Jon Moxley, you better bring more than just a fork, because I will always be the international champion, because I'm freshly squeezed Orange Cassidy and I do not have a catchphrase." This was an awesome promo. Like, I kind of compare, like I brought up that Jon Moxley promo after Punk did Brawl Out, and of course we then had Brawl In, and this time it's Orange Cassidy giving that promo that just gets you so pumped and so excited for this character and the match they're going to go into. This was just an incredible little beat here, wasn't it?
Oh, it's so good. And it's obviously at the early on in the show, Jon Moxley does his promo that we're going to talk about after this. But
he does it after.
Oh, does it after? Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it's a response. Yeah,
it's such a good promo that in my head this closed the show. In my memory. But yeah, this was such a perfect final beat to then send you into the pay-per-view in terms of getting you hyped and excited. Really, really a great job from Orange Cassidy here. And yeah, as we're kind of just saying, in terms of things that help establish him as both a character and the champion that's going to be able to show that fight. Orange Cassidy doesn't do promos anything like this. You don't normally get to see this side of his character. So him kind of just taking a second and just to kind of, as an audience, just kind of letting you in a little bit, really, really helped set up what's going to happen, especially with what Jon Moxley says as well. The two, for me, it's the two together. They're both just as, I feel like it's one of those promos that might go down as like an iconic moment in terms of like Orange Cassidy's run in AEW. But yeah, for me, it's the pairing that really makes it work. Orange Cassidy says this, gets you so behind him, gets him so hyped. Then Jon Moxley does his promo, and he's so good that you get even more behind Orange Cassidy.
Yeah, I like in this promo specifically, and off the back of Stadium Stampede, I like how he said, like, he really steps up to Jon Moxley and like has a lot of fire behind him in saying, like, you better bring more than just a fork, because that's what he brought to Stadium Stampede. Like, and I beat you. Like, Orange Cassidy, he won that match for his team at Stadium Stampede because he was willing to go further than Jon Moxley went. So he's like, you better bring more than a fork to this match. Like, he believes in himself and the crowd believes in him. And then, of course, afterwards we get like an incredible promo from Jon Moxley as well. You know, as I said, like before, Jon Moxley, like he gives great promos for breakfast. But this is a particularly good one. Like he says Orange Cassidy is a puzzle 31 men before him couldn't solve. You know, he puts over him forging his own path. And he's got this great line. He said, they called him a cosplay wrestler. If that's the case, who was he pretending to be? Did any of those people become the winningest champion in pro wrestling? You know, like really sticking his middle finger up against some of those talking heads. You know, he acknowledges that, he himself has kind of like seen and done it all, but he says like the opportunity to beat Cassidy is once in a lifetime because Orange Cassidy is having the run of his lifetime. And then like the best bit of the promo is right at the end, and he says that he is a technician of the highest order, but he isn't going to target Orange Cassidy's arm, shoulder, or legs. He targets a wrestler's soul. He tests their heart, their spirit, their guts. He says a lot of people say they want to be pro wrestlers, but when it gets hard, they give up. And that is the question at All Out, Orange Cassidy. When it gets hard, and it's going to get really hard, will you look for a way out? God, I hope not. A lot of people believe in you, Orange Cassidy. This Sunday at All Out, don't disappoint us. Oh, it's so good.
Oh, it's like, so good.
Yeah. It just sets the scene for a big match, and it puts Orange Cassidy over so much. Like, it puts over the challenge in beating him. He's saying like, this is a puzzle that other people couldn't do. Like, to him, even though I've done it all, this is once in a lifetime. And like, just at the end there, that line, he says, a lot of people believe in you, Orange Cassidy. Don't disappoint us. Instead of saying like most would say, don't disappoint them. Like, the fans believe in you, don't disappoint them. He says a lot of people believe in you, don't disappoint us. He's including himself. Like, he's like, I don't want to be. I'm coming up against you. Like, I don't want to be disappointed in you because in my mind, this is a huge thing for me. Oh, it just frames the match so perfectly.
Oh, it's that final beat at the end of it as well, which is like, oh, he believes in him too. He wants him to step up. It's like, oh, it's so good. It's an absolute expert. If I'm doing promo school, if I'm showing those NXT young'uns how to cut a promo, this is what you show them. Or this is absolute perfection in not just positioning yourself as the mountain to overcome, as in I am the guy you prove yourself against, but also lifting up Orange Cassidy and all of his achievements. And also he sets the challenge, and he tells you that he believes Orange Cassidy can overcome this as long as Orange Cassidy brings it. And that's what it's that essence of linking that with the Orange Cassidy promo, where Orange Cassidy is also telling Jon Moxley that I'm going to bring it. You better bring your A game because I'm going to. And Jon Moxley just thriving off of that. That's why they work so well together. Because you know that Orange Cassidy is going to try to bring it. And Jon Moxley is just like, well, don't disappoint us then. It's so good.
Another really good thing it does in the lead up is it frames the match and frames what Orange Cassidy's challenge in the match is going to be. Orange Cassidy's challenge isn't necessarily just to win it. His challenge is to get into the deep waters and not give up, which is like knowing what the result is, and that Orange Cassidy is going to lose. It sets up a win condition for him that isn't winning the match, which is so I love what you said though, like in terms of it's like wrestling school 101. You hear that thing from Chris Jericho, which sometimes I wish he would actually listen to, where he's like early on in he like went into the ring and he talked about this veteran, and he like talked about how he was this old and washed up veteran. And when he got back, the guy said, that was the dumbest wrestling promo you could ever do, because even though like you insulted me, now you just told everyone that I was absolutely washed up, and when I beat you, that's going to mean that I've been beaten by someone who's who's like old and washed up. Like I just insulted you and said you were nothing. Whereas this does the complete opposite. This is building him up, and then even setting a win condition so that even if he loses, he can still come out of it on top.
Somewhat similar to what the Pac match was. Obviously, it's a much lesser elevation. It's more of an establishing thing. But the whole he's going to try thing, where Pac is that similar mountain, and Orange Cassidy in losing, but still but actually trying. He got that win condition because he tried. And this is a much higher stakes version of that. Of that story. He tried, he won the fans' love, and production-wise, staying on Orange Cassidy after the match. Like John, they didn't do the thing where the champions won it and we stay on the champion. Hooray, it's his time now. No. When Jon Moxley's had his celebration with his club, then we stay on Orange Cassidy in the ring and we soak in the applause from the fans. Because as you were just saying, even though he lost the title, he won his other win condition. He did earn the respect of the fans. And in doing so, it's quite so dumb of just looking at win and loss records, being like, oh, he's being buried, he's being da-da-da. This was a really great example of he had a condition set where when he loses, he actually long-term wins because he gained so much support.
I'll have to ask you to woo your horses there, because you're talking about the end of the match. We've got a match to talk about. Let's get to All Out 2023, of course, due to Punk-related reasons. This ended up being the main event of All Out and was kind of a fulfillment of the Orange Cassidy run in terms of being like that heart and soul of Dynamite, and then he gets it and he gets this belt and he takes it to the main event of a pay-per-view. It gets full main event fanfare and entrances. They both walk in with their crews behind them, and Orange Cassidy gets an absolutely massive ovation when he comes out with the Best Friends and Chris Statlander. I've got to ask, what's your favorite Orange Cassidy theme? Are you a Jane man? Are you a Pixies guy? Or do you like the original Best Friends entrance that he used to go out to? What's your choice?
I think personally it's Jane for me. I'm not as big a fan on the Pixies. I think my least favorite would probably be Best Friends, because it's not his theme. It works when he was their friend and wasn't the main character. but as soon as he becomes the main character, like he needed his own theme, for definite. And the Pixies worked well enough, but I just feel like Jane fits the character so much better. I don't know if it's just because it helps bring the vibes of Paul Rudd's character in Wet Hot American Summer. Like it's a much better link to that character than the Pixie song is. It just feels like it fits way better. It helps get, it's in terms of thing of it's why WWE themes suck, where Death Rebel themes suck, where the music plays but it doesn't tell you anything about the character. I feel like Jane tells you more about Orange Cassidy paired with the Titantrons and everything better than the Pixie song does. And for me, that's more important. It doesn't matter if the song's better or not. I mean, personally, it is. It doesn't matter. But in terms of what it tells you about the character when they come out, like with the Royal Rumble, not even Seth Rollins himself watching on knew who was coming out when someone's music played. It was that generic. whilst here with Orange Cassidy, it tells you so much about the character, and for me, that's why it's the best one.
It's instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
Both of them actually are. Like, I like both songs a lot. I like Jane more probably, but to your point, it's interesting how like he got Jane, which is a much more traditional wrestling entrance theme than the Pixies, in terms of like it's straight classic rock. It's got like that great piano build, like piano riff to start off with as a tag, the synths, and then the lights and the guitar riff like all interact fantastically with the Tron and the single firework they shoot off for him. But he sort of got that when he was starting to lose the trappings of like being more of the quirky comedy guy, because I think as his progression went on, he just became more of a straight standard wrestler. Not that he was completely straight down the line, but he was less quirky, less comedy based. And the Pixies is sort of, where is my mind? It suits that a little bit more, whereas Jane definitely suited this run. And I think it's just such a great song, particularly with, the intro that it's got. And I also love his Titantron graphics. They're very much him. Like, at the moment he's rocking one that's got like some things. I think he's got like Trent being hung or something like that. And at one point he had like him holding a Wheeler Yuta's head, like from the hair, when he never forgave Wheeler Yuta for betraying the best friends. I really like that. Really, it adds a lot to him. So like, as he comes out, Taz and Excalibur, they're massively putting over Orange Cassidy's title, and as soon as they get in the ring, you get like this great contrast of their characters. Orange Cassidy's sort of like leaning up against the ropes. He's looking around. He's lapping up the crowd applause. And, like he really slowly and lackadaisically moves to the center of the ring, while Jon Moxley, he like marches to the center straight away. And he's kind of like pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. Like it's just like a perfect distillation of their different approaches and characters.
It's like what Jon Moxley wants is like when he's had a match with like Tomohiro Ishii and they're head to head like immediately. That's what Jon Moxley is almost like trying. That's his house. That's what he wants. So he almost like approaches the middle of the ring at the start of this, like it's like, come on then, it's fight time. And obviously someone like Tomohiro Ishii, he's going to step up as well and they're going to headbutt and it's going to be awesome. But with Orange Cassidy, Jon Moxley steps into the middle and Orange Cassidy doesn't move. He's still got his shades on. Like he's not moved at all. He's not. I think he's taken his jacket off. So I'm trying to think how little did Orange Cassidy actually do? Did he even take his jacket off?
You know what it reminded me of? And we're recording this prior to Forbidden Door this year, but it reminded me of the Jon Moxley Naito match in the G1 in 2019, where like Naito is just like a next level troller, and he like walks to the ring in his suit and he's doing these little baby steps as Jon Moxley's like raring. He's like roaring in the center of the ring, ready to go, and like he takes forever to take his suit off just to piss Jon Moxley off, and like just like these two like chaotic faces. I love that there's a bit of that in this. This initial face off. And, like once they do get going, Moxley's like really quickly on the offense. Cassidy goes to put his hands in his pockets to start the match, but Moxley just batters him straight away. Like it pretty much sets up the pattern as straight away, like immediately, that Jon Moxley is just going to bully Orange Cassidy. And, even though, an Orange Cassidy gets some offense in, there's a little bit of dueling chants, but Moxley very consciously works towards changing those chants into boos. At one point it's saying freshly squeezed, let's go Moxley, but he, starts just being just brutal with Orange Cassidy. He just like dumps him out of the ring. Orange Cassidy just falls flat on the floor. Moxley like goes out of the ring and he's like strutting around, flexing his biceps. And he's just very much living up to that promise of making things very hard for Orange Cassidy.
Because like obviously like you brought up Naito with the trolling. Like Orange, one I guess like big difference is the commentary as well will talk about what Orange Cassidy's doing here. He's trying to get in the mind of trying to play mind games with Jon Moxley. Obviously, the way I interpret the Orange Cassidy character is he's just taking his time. Like that's he doesn't. He's not. I mean, I brought up the Undertaker.
There's a bit of both.
So yeah, he's not doing the long entrance to play mind games almost to that level. Like he knows it can have some effect. I guess one great example is last year in the G1, to directly keep going with the Naito comparison. The proof that Orange Cassidy isn't being a big troll is with Naito in the G1 last year. One of the matches, I think it was the main event, Naito does his really slow entrance, as we talk about, almost like shuffling his feet as he's walking to the ring, like really slow. And then his opponent, whoever it was so eager that when Naito got onto the ring apron finally after like 3 minutes or so, he then was like really unhappy with how the ref pulled down the ropes. So he was like, no, let's do the whole thing again. So he goes back up the ramp, he goes backstage. It was like, hit my music from the start again, and he comes out and he walks at the exact same slow pace, and the guy in the ring is like, oh, for God's sake. It's like that's next level trolling. Well, for all I know, Naito then sprint down to the ring in a bit of to catch him off guard or whatever. But Orange Cassidy's never going to do that. That's not in his character. He's not staying in that corner to troll you and get you annoyed or whatever. It's almost I want to draw a football comparison because the Euros one at the moment. But it's how you controlling the game can set the pace for the game, forcing the other team to play at your tempo. And that's kind of how I feel like Orange Cassidy. It's like he's purposely passing it around the defense, trying to get the crowd, trying to make the other one get a bit more annoyed that you're like not really pushing for it. But when they push in, that's when you then pass it around them, and then you can try and get a shot at goal.
Yeah,
that's more like Orange Cassidy, where he'll be very chill, just centre back to centre back, being like, "Oh, this is a lovely day in the park," type of thing. But the entire time he knows what he's doing, he's waiting for that moment, and then he'll snap to life. And that, for me, that's one of the best comparisons with Naito and Orange Cassidy, is they're both so good at just having that sudden injection of pace where suddenly it just springs to life and it's just a flow of offense, which I feel like is such a great way to then have Jon Moxley just in reply, just brutalize the poor man. Oh, yeah, he was so brutal to Cassidy in this match.
Yeah, he like busts Orange Cassidy open. He's biting him. Like he gets you sick fuck chance. He like hits a pile driver. He like chokes him with his wrist tape. And there's like this incredible spot where he's got Orange Cassidy through the ropes. He's just like pummeling his face, just battering him with each arm. While he's got him held up against the ropes. And there's just like, you can see with each hit, more blood's coming out of Orange Cassidy's face, and they've got like a real close camera angle up on him, and Moxley's just like yelling, "This is your champ, this is your fucking champ now." If Jon Moxley's like, I don't think he's ever going to go full heel in AEW, but I feel like this is what it would look like if he did.
Oh, yes. I thought, because they kind of hinted at it a little bit with the Elite feud, the way they were kind of doing that.
And the Hangman one as well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I feel like they're guys where you could almost put them against anybody, and they could at that point, I feel like the feud of the Elite really established it, where they are so respected, where the audience will buy them as good guys or bad guys. And when I say respected, it's even to a point of they will boo them. they will boo the stuff they're doing and cheer the other guy. It's a level of respect where they believe the story they're being told, whatever side it is for the Combat Club at the moment. Like, that is, I don't think I've seen it before from a group where they're at that level, where they really could feud with anybody and you believe them immediately in their roles. But yeah, he's so brutal with Orange Cassidy.
Just a bully.
Oh, yes. For me, it's the moment when you first see Orange Cassidy bleeding and there's just a pool of blood, and the commentary do such a good job just selling the fact, like, look, there is a pool of blood on the floor. That is how badly this man has brutalized this other one. Like, in terms of obviously the entire point is to then sell the comeback for Orange Cassidy.
Yeah.
To give him that spot to show that fight that we were talking about with the promos, and the entire point of this is to show Orange Cassidy earning the respect of Jon Moxley, and there's only one way you earn respect with Jon Moxley, and unfortunately this is it.
Yeah.
You have to get brutalized by him and then fight back and brutalize him back. But yeah, it amps up to Orange Cassidy's fight back so well. And for me, it's when Orange Cassidy does fight back, still on like the outside and bloodied, because he's not staying down despite what Jon Moxley's doing, and he's done lots of wear and tear and stuff like after brutalizing him, but. I don't know if you want to take it over, but it's when Jon Moxley then goes to the outside, like, okay, then now I'm really gonna brutalize you. When he starts ripping up the floor.
Yeah, like he goes they're like outside near the entrance ramp, and like he's just ragdolling Orange Cassidy around. Excalibur's got a really great line at that point, kind of harkening back to Orange Cassidy's promo. Excalibur says the backpack is perhaps the heaviest that has ever been. And, like Moxley rips up the concrete. Orange Cassidy at this point, he's got like his whole face has just got blood all over it. There's blood on his tape on his wrists, and there's blood splattered on his pants when he tried to hit the Superman punch. Like it didn't work because his hand is damaged from the Stadium Stampede match. Like Moxley just feels so much bigger and so much more powerful than Orange Cassidy. But Orange Cassidy manages to counter Jon Moxley and hits a beach break onto that concrete after Moxley pulls it up. And, like suddenly Orange Cassidy's in control. And then Moxley, like there's this really long 10 count, and Moxley gets back in the ring, and Orange Cassidy immediately hits him with a Superman punch, a second Superman punch, and then a spear, and he's down, and they're going, and the count for 3. And like, I feel like this moment is the fulfillment of like Orange Cassidy's reign, everything that he's done. Like the crowd, they don't just want him to beat Mox. Like they think like in this moment, he actually can do it.
As even in terms of like a little note for the Orange Cassidy character in that moment, where in that moment when he's so hyped up, he doesn't hit one of his signature moves after the Superman punch. He hits the spear on Jon Moxley. As in that moment, his character is in trying to take the win in that moment. He's also sending a message. Like, that's not the kind of shit we saw from the Orange Cassidy character before this. The fact that he would do that kind of thing. But it's all part of the stepping up to Jon Moxley. As in, he's willing to play that kind of game now to get that win, proving he's willing to take that step. I guess for me, it's like it's a more subtle step, but it's one of the steps that Jon Moxley, that Orange Cassidy's having to take in this match to really prove himself. And for me, it just amps up the end so well. You are in full belief of Orange Cassidy at this moment.
Yeah, and it's also like a payoff to Orange winning in multiple ways in previous matches as well. Like, you kind of believe he could win off a spear because he's won off different moves. He hasn't always just won off the orange punch. Like he's, done his mousetrap roll up. He's done it off the beach break. There's different ways that he's won. So maybe he could win it off this spear, and it feels like it, and the energy in the room feels like it. But of course, Moxley gets his shoulder up at 2.999999999. And then like the place, like it was already on its feet, but it just becomes completely unglued when Orange Cassidy starts to do, Moxley's on his knees, and OC starts to do like the soft kicks to Moxley, but then just like starts to escalate, and he's just like fully punting Jon Moxley in the face before he goes for like his final one. But then, he's cut off by 2 giant King Kong lariats from Mox, and then a big Death Rider where he like spikes Orange Cassidy, and Orange Cassidy goes straight up for it, like straight down on his head, no protection, legs straight up. It's a brutal looking Death Rider. But he just, at 3, he just rolls his shoulder up, and the crowd is chanting freshly squeezed, and he gets it, but he is beaten at that point. He's been just demolished by Jon Moxley. He's been bullied. He's been, death rided and just managed to get his shoulder up. He hasn't quit. He hasn't given up when things got as tough as they could do, and where most people quit. Most people quit after a Death Rider, but he staggers to his feet. He can't do anything more. There's blood dripping from his head, but he gives Moxley the 2 middle fingers before Moxley hits a second, like potentially even a higher Death Rider. Like he just absolutely destroys Orange Cassidy with these 2 Death Riders, and gets an emphatic win. But Orange Cassidy never, ever gave up Imp.
It's the moment where the fans start chanting freshly squeezed, where I was just sat there going like, they did it. Yep, mission accomplished. Yeah. That's it. The fans believe in him, and because the promo beforehand was Orange Cassidy on Dynamite was Orange Cassidy telling us that he believes in himself, and Jon Moxley will go on then. But this is the moment where the fans believe in him, At that point where he gives him the middle fingers. Okay, he's accepting death. Okay, cool. It's that moment where he's at peak respect from the crowd, and it doesn't matter now that he loses because they've earned the respect. And as we were talking about earlier, the fact that in my minor spoilers, jumping right to the end of the match, where after Jon Moxley's had his whole celebration, the show doesn't go off air. We don't get the title card in the corner or anything. It then goes to Orange Cassidy in the ring, and we get to bathe in and just, I guess, bask in the glory, almost to steal the Keith Lee quip, of just Orange Cassidy's moment of earning the fans' full respect. And we just stay there for I want to say 90 seconds to 2 minutes. We just stay with Orange Cassidy in the crowd in that moment. And it's such a smart production idea, just to give him that time of just letting the fans and everybody soak it in. Because it's one thing to have the crowd, as I was talking about, where start chanting freshly squeezed, okay, that's the moment they respect. But to actually just stay in that moment for a little bit really helps just confirm it. And it makes it feel like an elevation rather than like a spot in a match where they properly elevate him. This is them confirming, no, he's been elevated by this.
It's almost like a Rocky moment in that, in the first Rocky, there's, of course, the fight that he doesn't win. But the climax of the movie in some ways and the peak of the movie emotionally is when he runs up those stairs, because that symbolizes everything that he has gone through to get to this point. And raising the fist in a moment of victory there at the top of the steps of a Rocky, that's the emotional high point of the movie. And in this story, Orange Cassidy, he's lost, but he's fought, he's lived and he's fought and he's held this belt and he's had this, what can only be described as an all-time mid-card reign, and elevated it to the main event. And the crowd is fully appreciative of him. It's a beautiful picture. And, you've got the thank you Orange chants as he pulls himself to his feet. And, Moxley has to be helped out by his team as well. He's not it's not like Moxley went out, just walked his way out. He has Claudio and Yuta holding him as he goes out, and Danielson as well there. He needs his help to the back. And, Orange Cassidy, he, even in the face of what would destroy most people, he never gave up, and he deserves that. He deserves that praise at the end. It's just a beautiful picture. And it's a beautiful way to end the pay-per-view. I'm not sure what the plan was to end the pay-per-view, but it feels like if the pay-per-view had ended in any other way, it would have been worse off for it. This is the perfect end to this pay-per-view, I reckon.
Cause it was meant to be CM Punk Vicky Starks in the title match for the, I'll call it the Collision show, because you're almost verging on a brand split at that point. But yeah, if that had been CM Punk just conquering Vicky Starks, it's just not, it just doesn't have the same level of oomph or, I guess because if you do the same pattern for Ricky, does it work? I don't know. If you basically rotate the spots of what Danielson did for Vicky Starks, you then put Orange Cassidy in the middle. Because I don't think the fans are, because obviously Vicky Starks playing heel at that point as well. So it's really not the same. Even though he did kind of get that feeling of proving himself against Danielson, it's a whole other level with Orange Cassidy. And obviously you have to take into the fact that they would have obviously changed different tempos of things within the matches, being that one would have been one mid-card, one would have been main event. They would have played to those different spots. But really, it's the fact that Orange Cassidy had all of that built in already, all of that kind of support. And it felt like such a natural progression from, as the reason I'm bringing up the Pac match, it felt like from that moment to here, it's such a kind of clear line all the way up for Orange Cassidy that I don't think it would have been the same had you put Vicky Starks there against CM Punk.
Yeah, it's I don't know. As I said, I just think it was the perfect end for this pay-per-view. Definitely. And it was a great pay-per-view as well, triumph of a pay-per-view, even though it was a week after, All In, which is, it was crazy that was how the scheduling worked out that year. So let's kind of move onwards a little bit to what happened after the match. So I feel like this was an amazing moment, a triumphant moment. And I think Orange Cassidy still maintains a lot of the goodwill and stuff that came from it. But the immediate follow-up to this kind of got messed up in Like, I imagine the original plans were for Orange Cassidy to beat Mox at Full Gear, but what ended up happening was Mox, of course, had a concussion in the match with Phoenix at Grand Slam, and they called an audible for Phoenix to win the championship because I guess they weren't sure where Mox was at that point. I'm not sure how that went down. I don't know the politics or who made the call and those sorts of things. But it certainly took an edge off the emotional intensity when it became then Orange Cassidy beating Phoenix and then defending the championship against Moxley at Full Gear rather than just winning it directly from him. Even, like the match wasn't as necessarily as good, but, I just like the build up in general just lacked the emotional intensity, I think, because there was that awkward back and forth with the title.
Yeah, and obviously it was a time as well in AEW kind of for almost a year. It felt like within that year there's just been rife of title swap stuff with the whole like Hangman, CM Punk, Jon Moxley. There's that whole triangle with the main title. We had interim stuff kind of all over the place. I can't remember when Thunder Rosa got injured, so even the women's had their little spell as an interim stuff. We had TNT title interim things. It was just like at that moment I remember there's a lot of pushback about using the interim title thing, and part of me was kind of like, it's also been bad luck. Like they wanted to do their main plans, but within such a small time frame, we had so many interim champions having to be kind of used to keep their stories going long term to combat stuff. Where I definitely got the feeling where fans were kind of getting a bit sick of it. Oh, another interim champion. It's like it's both a little bit their fault in terms of the roads they decided to go to before then needing to use an interim, but also not their fault because of course injuries happen. It sucks. It's just within such a small time span. So then when it happens again with the international championships, like, oh God, there was talk of like, is the title actually cursed? It was like, well, just give it back to Orange Cassidy. He seems to be all right with it.
Yeah. And I think just it like you almost wanted Orange Cassidy to go beyond that. And it feels like he's sort of going a bit beyond the IC type, the international, IC, goodness me, the international championship now. He's currently involved in other feuds outside of that. He's got a match coming up at Forbidden Door. That will be like a featured singles match outside of that, with like a really high level New Japan wrestler. So he's kind of moved on from it now, but you almost wanted him off the back of this Moxley thing. And I don't know where it was going to go. I think he would have been a great opponent for MJF, but I don't know if they saw him at the level of like wanting to be a world champion, even though, potentially off the back of such a successful mid-card reign, maybe he should have been in that conversation to become the next world champion. I believe at that point they'd probably earmarked Swerve, but, Orange Cassidy makes a compelling point to become AEW champion given what he did with the title as international champion. Even though, he's not someone who you'd ever really think of at that level, what he did was pretty remarkable, and that's generally what you would say is the proving ground for, can someone be a main event champion? What have they done as a mid-card champion?
I feel like possibly what we're seeing now could be the final proving ground stuff, where he's in a proper blood feud with somebody, and how does the character fare when you're doing something like that? Because especially what we're building up with the current AEW champion, where you're building up with Swerve, but in the back of your mind, you've got Hangman, as in he's got an ultimate, almost career-long, all-time blood feud going with Hangman. And which is why it's silly for, obviously I'm not on social media as much as I have, but to see the calls for some people calling for Hangman to return as a good guy because he was great as a good guy. It's like, are we watching the same show? He's amazing at it. He's such a compelling character. It doesn't matter. That's my kind of thing, is trying to slot it. It's what we've been told wrestling should be, where people have to slot into the good guy or the bad guy role. It's like, who gives a shit if it's a compelling character? Like, who cares what alignment they're meant to be? It's a compelling character. It doesn't actually matter, which is kind of like almost one of the theses behind AEW in terms of their early start, was this Cody Rhodes was talking about wanting to be done with heels and faces. And for me, a lot of people took that the wrong way. For me, this is what it means, where you look at the Hangman character, it's that complex character. And for me, Cassidy proving himself in a blood feud could be the final piece. It's quite often in AEW that has been the thing that's elevated someone. Unfortunately, especially for the women, where it seems like it's the only way for them to prove themselves is to have a blood match. But they don't call them blood matches, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Yeah. But with Orange Cassidy, I feel like that's maybe the final piece of him to prove himself as a possible world champion guy, is to have this blood feud with Trent and really elevate himself. Because the match they had, it kind of just was on the card for Double or Nothing. It was one that to me felt like it shouldn't have been there, because it felt like the feud needed just a lot more time to bubble. And so it was already a card where I was looking at it thinking, what else can be cut? So when they have the kind of match that they did on, it wasn't a bad match or anything, but it didn't really, because the entire point is to elevate Orange Cassidy. And when you've more got him on the card so that you've had him on the card because so you could get his fans to actually watch him, it's just kind of like, maybe just let it brew a bit longer, because the entire point is to elevate Orange. And for me, this could be the final step. And after this, because in my head, the revisiting Swerve and Orange Cassidy for the world title, that sounds like a no-brainer.
I was actually just about to say, Orange Cassidy has got history with both Ospreay and Swerve. So, coming up to Forbidden Door. And I also just had in my mind, like, maybe, because they've sort of taken a diversion away from Trent at this point. But after Forbidden Door, maybe they go back to that, and Trent versus OC is a feature match for All In or All Out. Like them having that big weapon
perfect for All In, just to play off of the previous year.
Absolutely. Agreed. 100%. Lock it in. TK, book it.
And then pay us. Don't forget to pay us a Khan coin.
Yes. Yeah, and pay us. Come on my podcast. Let's talk. I'll talk about TK. I'll talk about any AEW match you ever want to talk about. You can have your pick. I don't care if it's been done before.
We've got our connections. We can get in.
Imp, I just had a final thought, just kind of comparisons for this match. The immediate one we mentioned was, of course, Yuta versus Mox, or another one I think was Darby versus Mox. But a thought I had, a comparison I had, and I think the match that this reminds me the most of when I was watching it and thinking about it is not either of those matches, even though they do have a lot in common. The match I think of most is actually one that is very almost legendary in AEW's annals. So tell me if I'm way off base, but this match reminded me so much of Cody versus Dustin.
You have to explain which aspects.
So the aspects that it reminded me of was, of course, there's the blood, just the bleeding everywhere. There's the bullying performance from the other one, the mutual respect at the end. And obviously this doesn't end with Jon Moxley and Orange Cassidy forming a tag team to face the Young Bucks. But there is that brilliant post-match. There's an emphatic victory at the end where one guy is clearly beaten. He's been bullied and beaten. He's defiant to the end, but he is clearly beaten. And then there's an emotional post-match thing that's centered around the respect that has been earned through the bloodshed that's happened.
Oh yeah. Definitely in that 100% in that aspect. It definitely does. I think the other one,
and even just in the crowd responses as well,
because I feel like in terms of again, we talk about crowd conditioning and things. I feel like Dustin Cody is the very first moment of, in AEW, this is what really earns respect, is this level, showing this level of fight. Because I think when we talked about it on the AEW, on the top 10, what this did for Cody, what that match did for Cody was absolutely huge, and the momentum carried him for, I think it was into the next year, and of course the match happened in June or something. So it was such a huge moment in really establishing that character. He was the most over babyface in AEW for that little period. I say little period, it's over half a year, but he felt like such a huge deal. He felt so incredibly over. But I mean, good for him to be able to repeat it in WWE as well. But he's so incredibly over, it's insane. But the other match that reminded me of as well, because I was sort of realising when you talk about the Cody Dustin things, actually that's kind of an established way where, as AEW viewers, we've been conditioned to this is how you earn respect in some manner. Because it also reminds me of the Jon Moxley Wheeler Yuta match in that level of respect. I even brought up Bryan Danielson versus Vicky Starks, again in a similar overcoming.
Same show.
Show earlier in the night. We've seen it quite often in AEW now, where, especially with Black Belt Combat Cup guys, where that earning your respect in that way and overcoming such a violent kind of opponent like that and earning their respect, I feel like it's become an established thing in AEW of this is how you earn respect. And it is down to like audience conditioning and different things. And a lot of that is done through, as I talked about earlier, using Moxley as a proxy for the audience and earning that respect. I feel like it's become a part of the identity of AEW, and that starts with Cody Dustin.
Yeah, that's an interesting line to draw. And, it goes through so much. Like, as I said, there's like that Darby Jon Moxley match there. Like kind of a big way that Hangman sort of earns respect is through Jon Moxley as well. Like that's the way he kind of earns back his respect in 2023 after, a pretty tough second half of the year in 2022 after, losing the championship. Yeah, I think you're right with that. That's an interesting, and it's also an interesting point with audience conditioning and how that's set up in that Cody versus Dustin match. That's just, another reason why that match is just so incredible. The last thing I wanted to talk about was mid-card title reigns. Like, I cannot think like that there's any other mid-card title reign. I think it's not fair to compare like a mid-card title, so the TNT or international, to the World Championship, because the World Championship is a different beast in terms of how it's meant to feel, what it does, the position it has in the company. But in terms of mid-card title reigns, like there's nothing else that touches this. Surely the only ones I can think of that are remotely similar would be like Christian's recent TNT title run, which was just fantastic heel work from start to finish. Regularly a highlight and putting over, like getting, some serious audience heat in there. And then with the TNT title, of course, like Cody, who established the TNT title in his initial run, and then Darby Allin's had, particularly I think of his first run as just a slew of real banger matches, and almost doing a mini version of what they did with Orange Cassidy, where like Darby just kept on going and going and going until he came up against a bigger, more brutal opponent that he just could not beat in Miro. And the story of that very much was like his body slowly breaking down as he just tried to defend. And, he broke down under the weight of his championship, in the same way that Orange Cassidy did over a longer period.
I think that's it's one of my favorite things. He said not to compare it to world titles, but it's one of my favorite things about Okada's IWGP run, where I can't remember how many days that was. But it's one of my issues with when they were booking the Roman stuff in WWE. With Okada, you actively watched opponents figure his offense out and start to counter it or kick out of it or find a way through. So he would then start to do something different and try and win in a different way. And we brought that up with Orange Cassidy, where he was winning matches in completely different ways. So you never knew. There was never established pattern. And both Okada and Roman in their matches, they got their established patterns. But the difference for why I was able to watch so many Okada defenses compared to Roman, where they had to spread them out because they were kind of getting the same booking in a way, which is what is irritating. Why they then crowned Damian Priest champion, and then it's yet again interference matches. It's like, oh, okay, here we are again. But with Okada, they specifically had opponents figuring out, so he then had to adapt and start to change. Whilst at the same time, he's having these 30-minute banger matches and getting just broken over the course of time. So the wear and tear is just showing more and more over it. And it's kind of why my favourite Darby title run is the really short one he had, where he comes up against Samoa Joe. Where Darby Allin defends that title over and over and over and over and over in such a rapid, quick fire reign. But
and he takes it over to Japan for the Muta's last match, that's that tag match with Sting and Muta.
And for me it's one of my favorite TNT title reigns, just because he got it, almost had a blitz reign where he just charges at full pelt, and obviously his body gives up on him. And there is no way through Samoa Joe. I just absolutely love the booking of that. For me, it's obviously like a really small version of a reign. In terms of like investing at the moment, the only comparison for me for the Orange Cassidy thing was a completely different wrestler, but Gunter. For me, he was the best booked champion in WWE, like no question. Even though you got into the Roman Reigns storylines, but it kind of ebbed and flowed whether you were on board or not, because quite a few things repeated, and then the matches themselves were very repetitive. A lot of the shows would end kind of like, he's still champion, cool, whatever. Whilst with the Orange Cassidy one, you always were fully. Sorry, with the Gunter stuff, and when he came out of the matches, you're just like, that was fun, type of stuff. But he was another one who would have his developed patterns, but then actually mix it up a bit. So he didn't know how you're going to get beaten. Sometimes he'd choke you the hell out. Sometimes he'd power bomb you. Sometimes he'd splash on you. Sometimes it was a lariat. Like there were many different ways that he would be able to defeat you. For me, that's the closest comparison of like the recent era of like a champion who actually actively elevated the belt into a position where it felt like it could be a main event deal. To which I guess one difference is the people after it are benefiting, because like Sami Zayn and Chad Gable main eventing Raw and things, it feels like a big deal because Gunter elevated that title to such heights that the people after it are still benefiting from what he did with the work. Whilst unfortunately, maybe might have happened. Maybe we would have got a Jon Moxley Orange Cassidy a really big feeling match, but obviously injuries happened and the belts kind of flowed around a little bit since then. And I'm not saying I disliked Roderick's strong run, but from where it's at this point of All Out, the title is like nowhere near that same elevation, which is perfect to give it to Will Ospreay. And I did not mean to do an elevated elevation thing. This worked really nicely.
Yeah, I agree with that Gunther comparison, particularly in like, it becoming like a prestigious and very much looked forward to presence on, all your TV shows as well. And he had so many different mini feuds off the back of it, as Orange Cassidy did as well. Like I think of Gunther, and I think of like the feuds he had with Sheamus and Drew and Chad Gable, and like all of the Miz, like these sort of mini programs that happen over 2 or 3 weeks, and like you get really invested in it. And we talked about that with Orange Cassidy as well. Like you had the Swerve thing where they had like 2 weeks in a row. Like Pentagon, he fought him in the Stadium Stampede, and then they had a match a week after. Like, lots of stuff like that happening. So a lot of good comparisons there. Look, I am thoroughly talked out of this match. Like I loved this match so much. It was so fantastic, but I don't have a whole lot more to say about it other than it was great to go back and watch it, relive it. It's such a short match. It's a breeze to watch. It's like 19 minutes, but it feels like 12. It's such a breeze to watch, and such a joy to go back to. I feel like this is a match that's going to age very well, and that we're going to be looking back on it as, particularly in the legacy of, for Orange Cassidy, like a real high point in his career. Who knows where it's going to go, but certainly for him, a real high point, but also even for Jon Moxley as well, just like another example of him proving who he is in the company and showing the prestige and sharing that limelight with someone who you wouldn't expect to have got there in when you originally looked at, who is going to make up this company, AEW, back in 2019.
Yeah, it's almost like a passing of in terms of the heart and soul of AEW, going from Moxley to Orange Cassidy, as in who's going to be the one to carry that heart and soul feeling of AEW forward. They're positioning Orange Cassidy to be that guy really, really well. Doesn't mean he'll become world champion. Even when you were just speaking just then, I was just like, actually, yeah, this match does get elevated if they make Orange Cassidy world champion, or if they do at least a feud where they're trying to make you believe he could. Because that would always cement this as as we were talking about in terms of the elevation of his character. It's a core moment where the fans truly believe him in from this point forward.
Indeed, yeah. I always, as I said kind of earlier, I always thought it would have been great to stick him up against MJF, even if he lost at this point. Maybe the reason they didn't put him up against MJF is because at some point they do think he will be the champion, and they didn't want to burn that yet. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, Ib.
We're calling it now. He's the one who's thrown Swerve. We're calling it.
Look, I can think of worse things. And they could do worse things. It has been a pleasure having you on again. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for talking about this match and bringing it to the table here on the AEW Match Guide podcast. Would you like to get your plugs out of the way before we get out of here tonight?
Yes, at the start, Sam already eloquently promoted my show here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. It's Imp's WWE Adventures, where I talk for about 30 minutes about the week of wrestling that was. So the most recent one is about, what was it, Clash at the Castle? There we go, Clash at the Castle and SmackDown. Sorry, Raw, with the shows that I talked about this week on that one. So it includes like the White Six debut and whatnot. So I talked about that stuff, and it's been nice to talk about like audience conditioning with a show that's seemingly doing it normally, and the audience will actually it normally when you're talking about it. Like, it's trying to talk about viewer conditioning with WWE, because it's so prevalent in that show when you watch those shows, and I describe the crowds as Pavlovian responses to things, because
very much
like we're talking about with finishers, where you do a kind of a fake finish sequence in WWE, and it sometimes won't get a finish. It won't get the same reaction because they know the finish is coming whenever the finisher is hit. But that is viewer conditioning. Like we're talking about Orange Cassidy, you believed he could win with that spear because you've seen him win with different stuff. Anyway, but basically, yeah, just to I think you described it with my top 10 as getting me out of the drudge, getting me to talk about AEW. So anyway, yes, I'll do that every week. It gets uploaded late every Friday here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. Oh, late for the UK, it's like lunchtime for you Americans. And you can follow me on Twitter at the damn implicat. This damn is in damn. I didn't do it. Oh, I do. I'm so kind of sweaty in this room. I didn't put any emphasis into the damn. I apologise. Yeah. But thank you for having me as well, Sam. It's always fun to talk about AEW matches in this like level of detail and nerding out and stuff.
Indeed, absolutely. And, this was a great one to go back into and really dig into, a great title run. You can come and talk to me if you want to talk to me about Orange Cassidy's International Championship matches. Tell me what your favorite one was. Talk to me about this Jon Moxley match that they had. You can do so on Twitter if I'm on there at the moment or not, at Sir_Samuel, or even better, come onto the Social Suplex Discord, jump into the AEW Match Guide channel and hit me up there. I'll definitely find you there. And of course, we are on the Social Suplex Network. You can rate or review us if you've enjoyed the show today. We'd love to get a 5-star review. That would really help us out here. And of course, there's other shows on the network. One Nation Radio, Keeping It Strong Style, All Things Elite, Tunnel Talk, the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast, Wrestle Art with Chris Things, and of course, Imp's WWE Adventures. It's a great time to be on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. I think it's the best lineup we've ever had on here. No disrespect to people who've previously been on it. Sorry, Ricky and Clive. But I think this is the best lineup we've ever had. And you, of course, can listen to more episodes of the AEW Match Guide by tuning in every fortnight to the show. And I'll be back again in another fortnight's time with another one of AEW's greatest ever matches. And I cannot wait to see you then.
Thanks for listening to the AEW Match Guide podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then you can subscribe on the podcast app of your choice so you never miss an episode. Also, feel free to let me know on Twitter at Sir_Samuel. I'd love to hear from you. The AEW Match Guide podcast is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network, where you can find many other fantastic podcasts discussing not just AEW, but all parts of the world of professional wrestling. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Sam Brown.